The Chronicles of Picklestan. The West. Paul. The South was a frozen hellscape that no civilized man could live in. That must be why the men of the United Kingdom of the Swift lived there, for no civilized man would worship a thing as vile as the Swift. Nor, for that matter, would a civilized man put up with the chill of the South. Paul was no stranger to the snowy winters. He had written songs to be sung whilst people played snow wars, or a family bundled up during a blizzard. But this was something different, an eternal winter, without the comforts of a steam generator to keep him warm, as he would in his home in the great city of Hadworken. Oh, were he able to just sit there and work on his songs and plan the city's future. But no, the Pickles and that bastard back taco king had to make his life difficult. Starting wars and pushing for the back taco supremacy, he didn't even like Pickles. He didn't understand why they had to bother protecting them or saving them. But he had a duty, a responsibility, and a fear. "Cigar, sir?" asked his most trusted advisor, Nalick, a portly man with a head bald like an egg and the look of an imp to him. It was he who in fact directed his gaze to the threat of the back taco, and how integral securing Picklestan would be to check its advance westward. That had been successful, but oh, the cost it had taken to achieve. The Requiem had been brutally bloodied, and the reparations of the city of Weeb directed the anti-liberal Marines to the other side of the Barrier Sea, limiting their effective value in any future conflicts, limiting the time they have to settle roots in that city. And not to say of the infamous, who had decided now was the perfect time for a nap. If the back taco kingdom learned that the one who had single-handedly saved the lives of the kings of the West was now slumbering for who knows how long, the current affairs could worsen. His mind settled back to the cold of the South biting at his flesh and tearing into his bones, meant for warmer and fairer climes. He was here because he sought more allies, and he had been hopeful for the United Kingdoms behind Kinzo the Swift lover as allies. There were many tribes gathered behind a single principle: survive the storms. The Gaelics dwelled in the lowlands and survived the storms by going to ground. The Welsh in this rocky and mountainous east made walls into their hills to block the storm, or so they believed. Gameland frontiersmen known as Lascans drove them from their homes and into the care of the other kingdoms, mighty as they are. They are no match for the feared sharpshooters of the Gameland. The English were the people who settled in the parts of the South that could have something called a summer, which they spent raising maize that thrives in the short growing season, before entering their keeps and riding out the storms of winter, with the songs of the Swift keeping them warm. Final amongst the United Kingdoms were the Danes, coastal raiders that sailed up the western coast and pillaged and despoiled the peoples there. Sailors that, should a fair route be found, could augment the coastal defenses provided by the anti-liberal Marines. As for the other three, no better archers were found in the world than the English, and no men hardier in the West existed than the Welsh and the Gaelics. The army of the Power Couch had lacked the overwhelming storm of arrows that the English could provide, and with the armored center of the Gaelics and the Welsh, the madmen of the swamps could properly engage their foes with a solid wall to keep them centered and unflanked. "Sir," the impish man spoke again, holding out a cigar. Paul, roused from his thoughts, took the cigar from Nalek and placed it into his mouth. Tobacco from the swamps, a good benefit from the alliance with the infamous. Many of his men, whether they be mounted on horses, steam cars, or in the hatch of a patent tank, had already lit their cigars to both keep them warm and to give them something to distract from the cold. He lowered his head down to get a light from Nalek when something screamed over his head and thunder cracked in the east. "Snipers!" One of the cavalrymen shouted, his cigar falling from his mouth. One of Paul's guards grabbed him and threw him behind the armor of a steam car, whose gunner had turned his weapons to the east. The staccato of a .50 caliber machine gun tore out into the blizzard. The patent tank turned its main gun, swiveling as its captain bellowed out, targeting orders from the top. The cavalry had reared around, using the tank and steam cars for cover. Colonel Armstrong leapt from the back of his mount and dove for cover, a .44 caliber round missing by only a few inches from irreparably destroying his knee. Paul was thankful for the wind.
"Bobby thinks he saw where the first shot came from, President General. Am I clear to ride them down?"
But Paul was silent. He was at the Battle of Tuber, yes, safe about a mile from the real fighting, in a concrete bunker that could withstand a tank barrage. His hands were shaking more than just from the cold. Had it not been for Nalek's offer? Suddenly, he felt something thrust into his hands. His Colt .45. Armstrong was looking him in the eye, frost hanging from the man's mustache. "Stow that shit, sir. This is a battle zone. If you weren't president, I'd be slapping you for cowardice right now." He was deafened by another loud thunderclap and more shouting.
"Rock outcrop and due east. We saw it before the wind picked up, real bad. Do I have your permission to chase them down, sir?"
Yes, Colonel. Deal with them," Paul said, regaining his composure. Armstrong smiled like a shark.
7th Cavalry, let's ride them down."
He ran back for his horse, drew his 1913 and his 1911, and rode out with the first squad of the 7th Cavalry of Hadouken into the storm. A man died with a scream, his body only just barely in view, thanks to the snow. His eyes were full of shock and pain, and his mouth was missing. Paul retched into the snows. Battle was much less sanitized than field reports. "Sir," Nalek said, completely unbothered by what was going on around them as gunfire sounded and the shouts of panic were had, "should you not be entering a patent tank for cover?" Right, said Paul, getting out from the cover of the steam car. Shots rang out, and he heard the charging yell of the 7th Cavalry as they presumably found their enemy. He was approaching the side of the patent tank as a yell from the forest caught his ears. He dropped his Colt. Sasquatches were normally a people that kept to themselves in the depths of their woods or their high peaks. The Wookiee clan were not the norm. They were aggressive, they were violent, and for some reason, they were supportive of the back taco. Great beasts that stood tall, 8, 9 feet tall, covered with fur, with mouths full of teeth that were so full they barely closed. Their war cry was that of a dog gargling oil, and their weapons were crossbows that carried molten rods of iron. One cracked out, the force of the shot punching through the rear armor of the patent tank and slamming into its captain from behind. The man died screaming as his organs were melted. The Wookiees shouted their war cry as some ran forward with clubs made of wood and capped with heavy stones. Paul raised his hand to shoot at one of them and found his gun missing. Searching the snow for it, finding it glinting in the light of the steam car's headlights, he snapped up and saw the red eyes of a Wookiee warrior looking down at him, ready to crush his skull with his club. An auxiliary ran over with a knife and slammed it into the side of the monster's thigh, and twisted. It screamed as Paul fired at the monster. The first shot missed. The second took it in the shoulder, but only made it angry. The third was in its face, tearing off part of its jaw and causing an eye to fall. but it still roared in anger, and the fourth and fifth slammed into its heart, causing it to kill over and finally die. The sixth, seventh, and eighth fired off into the storm, and the gun clicked 4 times before he stopped pulling the trigger. The auxiliary ran forward. "Mr. President, I'm fighting for me country." His trade speech was poor and thickly accented, but the thought was respected. Paul racked another mag into his coat, glanced at the warrior's sling. "You'd find better use with this," he told the man. The man's eyes sparkled as he took the weapon, something that would have cost his entire clan 10 years of wages to afford a single round for. A Wookiee came running forward, and the warrior snapped off 3 shots into the monster's head, destroying its skull and breaking its brain. Nalik grabbed Paul and dragged him away from the fighting as the guns turned. He was thrust behind a steam car, away from the snipers and the monsters, and there he thought he heard singing. Then he knew he heard singing as the words coalesced. "I don't like your little games. Don't like your tilted stage. The role you made me play of the fool. No, I don't like you." The voice was angelic, yet off-putting, like there was something evil beneath it, something in his bones that made him fear it, like a rabbit that sees a man. Coming out of the snows, he saw an army of women moving forward like the undead that would sometimes march during evil nights. Blonde hair and freakish fake smiles, long nails with a variety of colors, chattering and muttering the song under their breath. But the song was greater than that of some muttering women. "I don't like your perfect crime, how you laugh when you lie. You said the gun was mine. Isn't cool, no. I don't like you. Oh." And then he saw it. A monster he'd only read of and only half believed in. Titanic, with a throat engorged by a kind of foul organ that produced song. A forest of blonde hair and lips stained red from the blood of victims. Riding upon the monster was the one thing that kept it from gorging on the men of the United Kingdoms. The Frogman Kermit. The women surged forward, charging the Wookiees as the song continued. "But I got smarter. I got harder in the nick of time. Honey, I rose from the dead. I do it all the time. I got a list of names, and yours is in red, underlined. I check it once, then I check it twice. Oh." He gasped in shock as 2 of the women held down a Wookiee warrior, and a third and fourth clawed at its eyes, giggling with their talons, and a 5th chewed at its guts. Another fired its crossbow, piercing 3 with but 1 shot, but they did not care, continuing forward and tearing it to shreds. The survivors fled back into the forest, the sounds of gunfire silencing as the men turned to look at the monstrosities about them. They glared at them, horrific evils in the eyes of these women. Then the song was silenced by a banjo playing. The Frogman Kermit calmed the women, and with his song drove the Swift away from the field of battle. The auxiliary returned, handing the Colt back, and said, "Ne'er thought I'd see the frog rid the Swift." "Your name," is all Paul said as he took his weapon back. "Andrelio Onamatarian Aspecarian," said the man. "Okay, Andre, you'll be receiving a substantial bonus upon your return home." The man's eyes went wide. "Thank you, President General." Yeah, said Paul, stepping away from the vagrant auxiliary. Nalik was right there next to him, a fresh cigar and a lighter for him. Armstrong came back, his horse bleeding from its shoulder, and the man having a bandage over his eye, with half his face covered in frozen blood. "We routed the Laskins. There were 4 of them, sir." He hopped off his horse, landing in the snow with a thud. "Killed him to a man, 2 wounded, 1 dead." "Who did you lose?" "His name was Robert Paulson. We call him Bobby." "I see. See to it that his death is handled as you would. but with higher honors than usual. He died for his President General, after all. So does everyone in the 7th Cavalry, President General, the colonel said with a tone that Paul did not like, but understood after his first brush with death. He realized his hands were still shaking and made fists to stop them. "Where is Kinzo?" he asked, trying to change the subject. "His goddess arrived here before he did. He better not have sold me out. I wouldn't put it past these rural savages," Armstrong said. "Uncivilized and disrespectful. Wouldn't be surprised if the whole damn kingdoms turned pickle sodomite on us." "Their goddess saved us," Nalek said, "so they probably haven't all joined the back taco." Armstrong made a sour face as he lit his own cigar and put it into his mouth. It only takes the most of them going sodomite for all of them to be a problem.
"Sirs,"
a cavalryman said, riding towards them.
"the Southerners are coming. They're only 3 miles from us."
"I hope for our sakes you are wrong, Colonel," Nalek said. The ranks of English parted for their king to arrive. Kinzo of the United Kingdoms was dressed in a fur coat with a collar of swift hair. He carried a longbow, as his people did, upon his back, and was flanked by 2 tapestries of his make, though with the winds and the snows it was hard to see the details. Which was a shame. They looked very well made, with what little the president could see. He was flanked by a Gaelish man with a massive black claymore and a Welshman with a dragon banner at rest against his shoulder. There was no Dane leader, and no Danes in the ensemble of warriors behind the king. "The gobshite king of the Ebonite cunts!" The black sword spat at Paul, spittle flying freely. "Wallace," Kinzo snapped. The Gaelic snorted as he drew a flask and swigged. "President of the Kingdom Hadorkin," Kinzo began, "I know you have come about the back taco menace, though the game land is of greater threat to us. The Alaskans have driven out the Welsh, raid our migrating herds, raze our dwellings, and worst of all, they offend our goddess with their heretical claims of her being mid and a bad singer. If the city of Hadouken will help the United Kingdoms restore order to our lands, we will provide warriors to face the back taco." Paul looked at the assembly. Wallace, the leader of the Gaelics, was an independent, vulgar man with no respect for authority, and the Welshman didn't have the bearing of a king. Maybe a 2nd or 3rd princeling, but no king. "Why should I help someone who doesn't even muster a proper assembly?" Paul asked. "Where are the Danes? Where are the leaders of the Welsh?" Well, the Irish are being, difficult," Kinzo stated. "The Irish? Aren't a bushel of them worth less than a quiver of arrows?" Armstrong mocked. "No, you dandy, you thought so too. You get learned fast when you overlook the danger of an Irishman," Wallace spat. "End it," Paul commanded. "You fight a war on 2 fronts. I will not expect fighters from you, but you have something else to offer for the support of Hadouken." "Name it," Kinzo said. Wallace spat. "We know what the gobshite will ask. It's what those Hadouken cunts have always asked for. They want to open up the earth for the peat, the iron, and the coal, to make good men build railways and factories and pay us with their silly paper. So we must buy their goods at whatever price they set. They want to enslave us all as evilly as the back taco seeks the enslavement of those foinked pickles. If you want our help facing the Irish and the Alaskans, you will need to give Hadouken land rights, Kinzo. We must have those resources, so when the back taco comes again, and you know it will, we can resist. The fields of tubers still scream in the minds of all, the horrors of the back taco unleashed upon the world." Paul shivered. He could only imagine someone who had seen the face of Dermy as he had. He clenched his fists visibly. "Do we have an accord, King of the United Kingdoms?" Paul offered his hand. Kinzo paused before taking the hand. "I have a gift for you to show our friendship." A warrior strode forth with a masterly crafted bow. The wood was yew, imported from someplace far to the west, and it held 4 bowstrings crafted from the hair of the swift. He took the bow and strummed it as though it were a harp, and the strum was the most beautiful he had heard, a weapon and an instrument, a kingly gift indeed, and one he accepted graciously. Then the song was silenced by a banjo. I just said pickle sodomite. I just said the word pickle sodomite out loud in dead seriousness. You will pay, Shadow. You will pay. All right. Oh my God! How long is this? How long can I keep this up? I have no idea.